EU to tighten rules on plastic imports to support local recycling. China urges US to reverse drone ban, vows to protect firms. And Iran cuts off gas to Iraq, triggering major power shortage. Welcome to the Economic News Bulletin. We start off with the UN Trade and Development UNCTAD, which has launched the first global database tracking e-commerce value, aiming to address a critical measurement gap as digital trade outpaces traditional economic growth. The database aims to guide policies on taxation, digital trade, consumer protection, and support for small businesses. UNCTAD plans a 2026 review to include AI, platform-based models, and fully digital services. Supported by Saudi Arabia, the initiative calls for international cooperation and innovative data tools like electronic payment records and data mining to ensure globally comparable e-commerce metrics. The European Commission has announced plans to impose stricter rules on plastic imports in 2026 to support struggling EU recycling plants, which lost record capacity in 2025 due to cheap imports and high energy costs. Concerns include the mislabeled virgin plastic being sold as recycled. Measures will include stricter documentation, separate customs codes, audits of recycling plants, and verification of shipments. The EU may also consider trade action and will monitor imports through a new task force. Anti-dumping duties on Chinese PET plastics are already in place, and rules for chemically recycled products are under review. Still in Europe, Spain's central bank raised its 2025 growth forecast to 2.9%, driven by strong domestic demand, tourism, and EU recovery funds, with inflation expected to ease in the coming years. Despite this, many households struggle as wages lag behind rising costs. Food and housing prices have surged, leaving real wages below pre-pandemic levels, particularly in tourism, retail, and hospitality. Economists warn that macro growth masks inequality, and without faster wage gains or productivity growth, household purchasing power may remain weak. Moving to Asia, where a new estimate from the Rodinium Group has reported that China's economy likely expanded just 2.5 to 3% in 2025, roughly half the pace suggested by the official data. Rodium cites a collapse in fixed asset investments, leaving $500 billion in lost demand. Despite Beijing likely claiming around 5% growth in March, investments fell sharply mid-year, dropping 12.2% by October. The think tank forecasts a 1 to 2.5% growth in 2026 and questions the accuracy of official data amid persistent deflation. Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged centrally administered state-owned enterprises, SOEs, to better serve the Communist Party and national priorities and to contribute more to China's modernization drive. Speaking at the meeting of the SOE leader, Xi also stressed tighter supervision and stronger party leadership. Premier Li Qiang said SOEs should support major infrastructure projects, develop emerging industries, and ensure stable energy and resource supplies during the 2026 to 2030 period.
李强指出，“15+5”时期是基本实现社会主义现代化夯实基础。
Still in China, Commerce Ministry has called on the United States to halt its wrong practices of adding all foreign-made drones and key components to a new security list, vowing to take measures to protect Chinese company rights. The U.S. Federal Communication Commission announced Monday it had placed Chinese drone makers DJI and Autel, along with all foreign-made drone systems and components, on a covered list of entities deemed to pose unacceptable national security risks. The move will block approvals of new drone models to import sales or sales in the United States. The ministry did not specify what retaliatory steps it might take, but warned that China would safeguard the legal interests of its firms. The Reserve Bank of India has stated that India's economy continued its robust growth in November, supported by private and urban consumption. The economy grew to 8.2% in the second quarter, its fastest pace in 6 quarters. The central bank credited coordinated fiscal, monetary and regulatory policies, including tax cuts on consumer goods and a total 125 basis point interest rate reduction in 2025 for sustaining growth. The central bank raised its GDP forecast for the current fiscal year to 7.3% from 6.8% and lowered inflation expectations to 2%. The bank expects GDP in the first half of next year to slow slightly to 6.7 to 6.8%. The U.S. economy grew faster than expected in the third quarter, expanding at a 4.3% annualized rate versus 3.8% in the second quarter, driven by strong consumer spending, particularly on electric vehicles, ahead of expiring tax credits. Economists had forecast a 3.3% gain. Growth is uneven, with higher-income households fueling spending, while middle and lower-income Americans face rising costs. Large firms invest in AI, but smaller businesses struggle under tariffs. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates to 3.5% to 3.75%, but indicated borrowing costs are unlikely to fall further soon. U.S. consumer confidence dropped in December as worries over jobs and income deepened, signaling slower consumer spending after a strong third quarter. The conference board said its index fell 3.8 points to 89.1, below economists' forecast of 91. Chief economist Dana Peterson noted that while prices, inflation, tariffs, and politics remain top concerns, mentions of immigration, war, and personal finances, including interest rates, taxes, and income, rose in December. The International Monetary Fund has announced a staff-level agreement with Egypt covering the 5th and 6th reviews under its extended fund facility, potentially unlocking $2.5 billion. The 2 reviews were combined to give Egypt more time to meet key targets. In addition, the IMF reached a staff-level agreement for the first review of Egypt's Resilience and Sustainability Facility, potentially granting $1.3 billion more. Both agreements still require approval from the IMF's executive board. The IMF mission, led by Valdekova Holler, praised Egypt's stabilization efforts, noting economic growth despite regional and global challenges. The Suez Canal Economic Zone Authority has signed contracts for 3 major industrial projects in the Sokhna under Teida, Egypt, totaling about $1.2 billion in investments. The first, with Chinese firm Shen Fengming, will build an integrated polyester fibers and polymers complex costing over $800 million, covering 400,000 square meters in 3 phases. It will have an annual production capacity of 1.08 million tons and create around 3,000 jobs. Construction for the first phase starts in May 2026, with production expected in late 2027. Iraq's Ministry of Electricity has announced that Iranian gas supplies have stopped completely, causing a loss of 4,000 to 4,500 megawatts as some power units shut down and others reduced output. Spokesperson Ahmed Musa said that Iran notified Iraq of the halt due to emergency circumstances. The ministry has switched to local fuel in coordination with the Ministry of Oil to keep power plants running. He added that production remains under control and most plants are operating, with preparations underway for peak winter demand through ongoing maintenance and expansion projects. To talk to us more about this, we're joined from Basra by Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Basra, Ahmed Saddam. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Qnews. Sir, firstly, let's start off here by asking you, how has the complete halt of the Iranian gas affected Iraq's electricity production capacity?
Thank you for having me. Actually, this issue is not new. Every year in winter season, repeated as by Iranian side. So due to high level of consumption in Iran, and this is related to the subsidies policy in Iran, so level of local consumption increase. And by this way, Iranian policy will redirect the gas production to the local consumption. Iraq also itself faces the big problem due to this reliance on imported gas from Iran. So losing 4,500 megawatt, of course, will affect the economic activities. Some studies stated that each 1 hour maybe will lead to lose by about, for example, $5 million for the whole country. So this, of course, will lead to reduce even the level of confidence of foreign investors in the economy. Case of instability and even frustration in the social side, of course, will be there. So electricity cut will reduce level of working hours, and by this way, of course, will affect negatively on the many economic activities.
Well, as you said, that this may cause some sort of frustration or a stalling in the economy. But how effective do you think that relying on local fuel as a temporary solution to keep the power plants operational and keep business going, is this going to help?
No, actually, the economic policy has not paid big attention to investing gas in the past years, except for last 5 years, and due to the pressure from Washington, and there was allowance for Iraq to import got from Iran, and after that, by the pressure from U.S. policy, the Iraqi government paid its attention to investing gas, associated gas. So by this way, level of gas, associated gas invested in fuel and oil wells. So this, of course, should be increased yearly by about 400 cubic feet, or standard cubic feet. By this way, we need, as stated by the oil ministry, there should be a need for 5 years, for example, to reduce level of gas flaring and emission. And if this policy be applied in practice, of course, maybe the Iraqi policy will reduce importing gas from Iran, and by this way, level of reliance on local production maybe will meet the local need of electricity power generation. Otherwise, of course, there will be a need to find other alternatives for importing gas from other countries.
Well, as you said there, sir, that Iraq is heavily reliant on importing gas from Iran. Given that this is a situation right now, do you think that power plants are prepared to handle the winter peaks and the load on the need for electricity during this time?
Within the short term, of course, there will be some substitution, but this, of course, will be costly. For example, some power station will use diesel, and the cost of this is too high. This could be applicable for maybe a short term, and this cannot be used, or these plants cannot continue to use diesel due to the cost of power generation by using diesel. Maybe other power station can use a heavy fuel. This maybe could solve part of the problem. And let me say that most of power generation in Iraq, around 70% of power plant using imported gas or working by natural gas. And by this way, of course, the economic policy in Iraq should accelerate its invest in local gas and reduce level of gas flaring, but this cannot be solved in the short term.
So given that you're saying right there that this is a temporary solution whereby they're using diesel, should the average Iraqi citizen expect during the upcoming winter months rolling blackouts, for instance, or high demand, when there's high demand for electricity?
Yes, of course. The level of demand also increase in winter season in Iraq, but in summer season, of course, will be higher due to the level of heat and high temperature and the need for using air cons. In this case, of course, will be too critical to the policymakers in Iraq. And of course, there is a need to other substitutions. For example, in the short term, there is a need to import gas maybe from other countries by floating storage plants, or finding other ways to reduce level of problem, or maybe accelerating gas investing, local gas inside the country. But this cannot be solved within one season. There is a need for time, maybe 4 years needed for this purpose.
Well, sir, you were saying that this is an issue with Iran generally during this season, that there's an issue with the gas in general. Do you think there are plans to somehow, as you've said, resolve this issue in the long term, not necessarily in the short term, by investing more in the gas industry or the gas production industry in Iraq?
In the long term, there is no substitution, like, for example, investing the local gas. So there are around 40%, till now, 40% of associated gas flared with the oil production process. So, of course, there is a high level of losing this gas and an increased level of carbon dioxide emissions. This is another issue related with flaring gas. And by this way, of course, there is a need for attracting foreign companies. There is a need to capture a project of gas. And this cannot be available by Iraqi local companies. So by this way, there is a need to new contracts with foreign companies which own the technology to capture gas associated with oil production process. This also cannot be, as I said, cannot be achieved in the short term. There is a need for about 4 to 5 years, as announced by oil ministry. And there is, for example, a need to invest around 400 to 500 cubic feet of gas. By this way, gradually, the Iraqi policy can reduce level of imported gas from abroad.
Well, until Iraq manages to reach that long-term goal, given the set of circumstances Iraq is facing right now, what kind of impact is the gas shortage having on industries and essential services across Iraq right now?
Of course, till now, and due to the high level of reliance on imported goods, the major impact will affect the social or the households in general. Other companies, of course, will be affected, but in general, most of local companies, they use, for example, a private generation or private electricity generation. So they adapted with the situation by this way. And due to the multiple cut of electricity every day, most of, especially medium projects, they use this way to reduce the negative impact of a national power generation, because within the day there is around 5 to 6 hours there will be a cut of electricity supply. So of course the effect will be high. Level of confidence of investors will be reduced by this way, and by this way, of course, the economic policy should solve the problem by investing gas and providing electricity power generation inside Iraq.
Well, sir, you talked about investing in the gas sector, but what other steps can Iraq take to diversify its energy portfolio, like, for instance, investments in other sectors such as renewable energy, whether it be solar or wind?
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
You spoke about, investing more into the gas sector, which is a long-term project. Do you think that Iraq needs to also diversify its portfolio in investment in renewable energies?
Renewable energies, there is a low level of investing in renewable energies. And due to the high level of heat and due to even the culture and consuming culture of people, I think the renewable energies cannot solve the problem entirely. This fact is available now because the high level of consumption of electricity, and also there is a high cost which could not be covered by households in general. So I think the renewable energies till now is not an efficient resource or is not efficient substitution for electricity generation. What is needed is to invest in gas and in power generation and for example, reconstruct some infrastructure related to electricity and a reduced level of losing. By this way, of course, some people maybe or some companies illegally they consume electricity without paying any fees regarding this, and by this way, level of consumption is highly increased inside Iraq if you compare the situation of Iraq with other countries.
Okay, thank you so much from Basra. That was the Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Basra, Ahmed Saddam. Thank you so much for joining us and thank you for your insights. Now we move on to the latest developments in the tech sector. New car sales in Europe rose year-on-year in November for a fifth consecutive month, driven by increased electric vehicle registrations. Sales increased 2.4% to 1.1 million vehicles across the EU, UK and European Free Trade Association region. Battery electric cars took a 21% market share in the EU and 26% in the UK. The growth comes amid a broader industry shift towards electrification through automakers face challenges from Chinese competition and recent EU policy adjustment. Sales rose at Volkswagen and Renault, but fell at Stellantis and Tesla, while Chinese rival BYD's registration surged 221%. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has stated that Toyota is recalling 55,405 vehicles in the United States due to risk of incomplete electrical contact at the inverter terminal. The recall stems from an improperly tightened internal bolt, which may lead to a poor connection in the inverter, a critical component in the vehicle's electrical system. According to the administration, a remedy for the issue is currently under development. Owners of affected models will be notified and repairs will be conducted at no cost once a solution is finalized. A regulatory filing has revealed that Netflix has refinanced part of its $59 billion bridge loan backing its planned acquisition of Warner Bros. Discovery film, TV, and streaming assets. The company secured a $5 billion revolving credit facility and two $10 billion delayed draw term loans, leaving about $34 billion of the bridge loan to be syndicated. The funds will help pay the cash portion of the deal, related costs, and general corporate needs. Netflix won a competitive auction for the asset, beating rival bids, including an all-cash offer from Paramount Skydance. The deal, which includes HBO and HBO Max, is expected to close after Warner Bros. Completes a planned business split in the third quarter of 2026. Moreover, Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison has personally guaranteed a $40.4 billion to back Paramount Skydance's renewed bid for Warner Bros. Discovery, aiming to ease concerns over its financing and counter Netflix's rival offer. Paramount said its $30 per share all-cash bid is unchanged, while raising its breakup fee and extending its tender offer deadline to January 2026. Warner Bros. Shares rose nearly 4% on the news. Ellison also agreed not to alter the family trust during the deal process. The company raised its regulatory termination fee to $5.8 billion and extended its tender offer deadline to January 21, 2026, as competition for Warner Bros. Assets intensified. In the energy sector, oil prices were little changed on Tuesday as potential sales of Venezuelan crude seized by the United States were countered by the heightened supply disruption fears after Ukraine attacks on Russian vessels and piers. Brent crude futures rose 6 cents to $62.13 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was up 2 cents at $58.03. Prices had risen by more than 2% on Monday, with Brent registering its biggest daily gain in 2 months and WTI climbing the most since November 14th. Silver has extended its record rally on Tuesday and hit the key $70 an ounce mark, while gold cut gains after setting an all-time high. The stronger than expected U.S. economic data sparked a pullback. Spot silver rose 0.7% at $69.48 an ounce after touching a record high of $70.66 earlier. Prices are up 123% year to date. The U.S. dollar trimmed its losses after data showed the world's largest economy grew faster than expected in the third quarter. Spot gold edged up 0.1% to $4,449.99 an ounce after hitting a record $4,497.55. U.S. gold futures for February delivery gained 0.3% to $4,480.20. Finance Minister Satsuki Katayama has said that Japan has a free hand to act against excessive yen moves, issuing her strongest warning so far that Tokyo is ready to intervene in currency markets. She said recent yen moves do not reflect economic fundamentals and appear driven by speculation. The yen firmed slightly to around 156 per dollar after her comments, but stayed near an 11-month low. Japan last intervened in July 2024 when the currency hit a 38-year low. The yen has remained weak despite the Bank of Japan's recent rate hike, as markets see little urgency for further tightening, raising concerns over higher import costs and inflation. That brings us to the end of our economic news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. EU to tighten rules on plastic imports to support local recycling. China urges US to reverse drone ban, vows to protect firms. And Iran cuts off gas to Iraq, triggers major power shortages. This concludes the Economic Bulletin, but don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok using the handle @QNewsUGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more.